Good evening and welcome to Des Moines for a live debate between Iowa's two candidates for the United States Senate. I'm Steve Carlin.
And I'm Ray Spigner. Tonight, KCCI, the Des Moines Register, KWWL, and KTIV host Republican incumbent Senator Joni Ernst and Democratic challenger Theresa Greenfield. In true 2020 spirit, this debate will not be like others you've seen. Steve, myself, and our three moderators are here in person. Our candidates join us remotely. Senator Ernst was in Washington after several days of confirmation hearings for U.S. Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett. Ms. Greenfield is live from Altoona.
Let's meet our panel of moderators tonight for the debate. Matt Breen anchors the evening news at KTIV TV in Sioux City. Brianne Fonenstiel is the chief politics reporter for the Des Moines Register, and Ron Steele is the evening news anchor at KWWL TV in Waterloo.
Now to our two candidates. Senator Joni Ernst is running for her second term in the U.S. Senate. She's a native of Red Oak, Iowa, and served in the military for more than 23 years. Senator Ernst is not only the first woman from Iowa to serve in a federal office, she's also the first female veteran elected to serve in the U.S. Senate.
Democrat Theresa Greenfield hopes to unseat Senator Ernst. She was raised on a small farm in Minnesota and moved to Iowa to attend college. She has a background in urban planning and real estate and development in Iowa. In 2018, she briefly ran for Congress in Iowa's 3rd District. Ms. Greenfield lives in Des Moines with her husband.
Now for the rules of tonight's debate. Candidates will get 60 seconds to answer a question. If a candidate is mentioned by name by her opponent, she'll get 30 seconds to respond once. Time cues will come from colored lights. The yellow light indicates 10 seconds remain. The red light indicates time is up. Candidates will get 60 seconds at the end of the debate for closing statements.
A coin toss is determined that Senator Ernst will answer first, so let's go to Ron Steele for the first question.
All right, Steve, thank you very much. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in. Thank you, candidates, for being here tonight, although be it at far different locations. My first question to Senator Ernst. At this time, 24 hours ago, the president was holding a huge rally not too far from here in Des Moines out at the airport. Thousands of Trump supporters were huddled in closely together, and some people say that is a super spreader event which sends the wrong message. It sends the wrong message to Iowans who are trying to mitigate COVID-19 right now at a time when Iowa, which has been a red zone state, cases are still very much on the rise. Does that set a bad example, and would you have been there, and how do you feel about holding an event like that in Iowa at this time?
Well, of course, I always do promote the CDC regulations, which is making sure that we are socially distanced, that we are wearing a mask, using the hand sanitizer, all of those precautions. Of course, everyone in Iowa has the decision to make. Do they want to attend an event, or do they want to watch it on television or streaming live? But again, I do follow the CDC precautions. I think that is really important to do so, but I leave those decisions up to Iowans. They will make the best decision for them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Greenfield. Let me ask you this. Joe Biden, I don't believe, has been back in Iowa since the caucuses. A lot of people say he is just being too overly cautious. So does an event like that set a bad example? I mean, how do you balance saving lives, stopping COVID-19, but yet keeping our economy open with an event like that in our state?
I'm sorry.
I'm not sure if she heard the question.
Clear, and so I don't know what it is.
Those technical glitches figured out and move on to the next question for Senator Ernst. You're joining us here tonight after spending the week in confirmation hearings for Judge Amy Coney Barrett. Republicans have downplayed the likelihood that a conservative court would overturn landmark policies like the Affordable Care Act and Roe v. Wade. But aren't those policies specifically reasons why Republicans have worked so hard to confirm conservative justices on the court?
I'm sorry, you are breaking up. If you could maybe try and repeat the question, but I do think we have a glitch with the connection.
Okay, we are having a glitch with the connection, so we're going to get that straightened out. We're going to take a little bit of a break right now. We'll be right back.
Menards is your complete bathroom makeover headquarters. Sterling showers have timeless elegance with convenient features like built-in storage. Add a beautiful sliding door to complete the look. They're all 11%.
Going back to the super event that the president had, super spreader in the eyes of his opponents anyway, at the airport. Joe Biden, though, has not been in our state for quite some time. I remember interviewing him in the basement at Loras College at the old field house, but that was a long time ago. Some people say he is simply overcautious. How do you feel about an event like that last night, and how do you balance stopping COVID-19, stopping the spread, yet making sure our businesses remain thriving and make a recovery?
Well, Ron, first I want to say thank you so much for hosting tonight's event, and I hope we have all of our glitches worked out, but if not, we'll roll the punch. I also want to welcome everybody to 6 Training Center, where I am at this evening. This is where they train apprentices start to earn and learn. Now, when it comes to super spreaders, I have to tell you, Ron, that our campaign has been focused on following the public health guidelines as the best we can, whether that is social distancing and wearing masks and really making sure we limit the size of gatherings that we have. And we're pretty delighted. We've done over 300 events around the state, and we're going to continue to connect Iowans in all 99 counties.
Thank you. Let's go over to Brianne.
Ms. Greenfield, you've criticized Senator Ernst for moving forward with a confirmation vote on Judge Amy Coney Barrett. Would you pledge to our viewers here tonight that you will not vote for a justice in an election year? Ms. Greenfield, you've criticized Senator Ernst for moving forward with a vote to confirm Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the U.S. Supreme Court. If you were elected, would you pledge to our viewers tonight that you would not vote to confirm a judge in an election year?
Well, I think confirmation process and the responsibility for United States Senator is incredibly solemn, and it's take very serious. I'll independently vet all nominees, any nominees. I want to understand whether they can be fair and impartial, and certainly their experiences. But to this particular process, you know, Iowans are going to the polls right now. They're independent voters and thinkers, and I believe that we should not be processing this confirmation. We should let the next United States Senate be seated, let the next president be seated, and then proceed forward with this confirmation process for a lifetime appointed judge.
So to be clear, would you leave that option open?
Okay, Senator Ernst, you apologize for implying that healthcare workers have inflated COVID-19 rates to drive up their reimbursements from the federal government. Your original response was criticized as spreading dangerous misinformation. What responsibility do you have as a United States Senator to combat misinformation? Senator Ernst, can you hear me?
All right. We're going to move on to the next question for Greenfield. Brianne, we're going to go back to you as we smooth out these kinks here, Brianne.
Ms. Greenfield, you've criticized Senator Ernst for her vote for the CARES Act, the $2 trillion coronavirus stimulus package. Yet you also say you would have voted for it too. Can you explain to us why you're criticizing the senator for something you yourself would have supported?
Well, I think it's really clear that Washington has failed us during this COVID pandemic and this economic crisis. And I've certainly been calling for months for a phase 4 package for Senator Ernst to stay in Washington and get that job. My criticism really focused on her exclude paid sick leave. You know, folks shouldn't have to decide whether they go to work, whether families, and possibly lose the pay or a job. I criticized her early votes to not support expanding our unemployment benefits with unemployment rates at record highs. And it's really critical that we take care of our workers. So there's 3 things I want to focus on when it comes to COVID, and that is the health and safety of all of us, focusing on our workers, and of course, particularly our small businesses here in Iowa.
Senator Ernst, can you please describe a measure that you didn't fully agree with but voted for anyway?
R3 Construction is here to assist you with damage to your home. We repair roofs on all types of homes. Licensed, bonded, and insured, R3 Construction is committed to superior quality and results. Call us now for your free inspection.
So in the Senate, if you're reelected, can you assure Iowans tonight that they will always have access to affordable health care insurance, even if they happen to lose their job in circumstances like we're seeing now during the pandemic?
Certainly, this has been a very difficult time for Iowans and, of course, all of America as we are going through the COVID-19 pandemic. So what we have to do is make sure that there is access to affordable, quality health care, which is where we are really working in the United States Senate and the Congress to find a way to provide affordable health care to all Iowans. What we have seen under Obamacare, while it did increase access to insurance, what it did not do was control the cost of health care. And that's why I've been diligently working across the aisle on a number of different packages, whether it is controlling the cost of prescription drugs. We did pass a law called the CREATES Act, which expanded access to various generic products, working with Senator Grassley as well to make sure that we are closing the Medicare donut loophole, is what they call it, and again, just making sure we have access to affordable insurance products, not what we have right now.
Senator, thank you very much. Theresa Greenfield, I'll ask you basically the same thing, but tell us really, what do you think Senator Ernst, what she should have done more, what she could do more to help unemployed Iowans?
From Iowa.
We have her just for a moment, but I'm not a lip reader, so I really can't understand what she's saying, as either can you. Steve, let's go back over to you and see what's up.
Okay, Senator, since you can hear us, your opponent supports a public option in health care, a plan that would create a government-sponsored health insurance plan that would compete with private health insurance plans. Republicans typically support competition in the market. Why do you oppose it here?
Yes, the public option that my opponent supports is just really a truck stop on the road to a single payer system or government takeover of health care. That public option, as done by a third-party independent study, could bankrupt up to 52 of our rural health care systems. You know, I depend on one of those rural health care systems. Certainly all of my family depends on those rural health care systems. Very important to those that live in the rural areas. So what we don't want to see is putting a bureaucrat between our physicians and patients. And certainly a public option, again, is that truck stop on the road to a single payer system. And we certainly don't need that.
But, Senator, some of those proposals for a public option call for higher reimbursement rates to rural hospitals. Couldn't that actually benefit them?
Well, that could, if we could get that done. And I would remind folks that as we sit in the United States Senate and in Congress, certainly there are fewer of us from those rural areas. And just trying to close that gap in Medicare reimbursements is extremely difficult. So, again, having that public option, while it sounds great to a lot of folks, it does provide a pathway into a Medicare for all situation. And that's, again, not what we want to see. We want to provide access to affordable health care, but we do that by lowering prescription drug costs, lowering the cost of overheads for those health care systems, and certainly allowing that competition. So allowing insurance products to be sold over state lines. There are many ways that we can achieve parity and lower costs within the health care system, but a public option or a single payer Medicare for all type option is simply not the solution.
We've got a question for both of you. What should the federal government's role be in ensuring affordable, high-quality health care for all Americans? Ms. Greenfield, we'll go to you first.
Well, again, healthcare is the #1 topic that I hear from Iowans on, and they're struggling with the cost, premiums, deductibles, out-of-pocket expenses. It doesn't matter where I travel the state. Farmers are paying too much up in Fayette County. Moms are paying too much out in Waukee. And the federal government sets those rules, and what I support is expanding and strengthening the Affordable Care Act. We've got a lot of tools in our toolbox, and then creating a public option that will create competition in the marketplace, level that playing field, and make sure that every Iowan has access to high-quality, affordable coverage, and it makes sure that we have competition and you don't have to rely on your employer. Right now, I have talked to folks who are entrepreneurs, and they want to get started, but the cost of health care has kept them from doing that, forcing them to stay in a job instead of growing our economy with their creativity.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Same question to you. What should the federal government's role be in healthcare?
Well, we do know that, #1, we have to protect pre-existing conditions. Now, my brother and sister are both type 1 diabetics, so I really do understand how important this is. And there is a way that we can provide a backstop for those that have the most medically complex situations. For example, Allie Steele of Dallas County, who has a congenital disease that requires a number of surgeries. And what we have to do is force insurance companies to make sure they're covering folks with pre-existing conditions. But we also have to make sure that those premiums are low for those families. Since the inception of Obamacare, when it went into effect 2014 until today, for those that are purchasing insurance policies, the premiums have doubled. The premiums have doubled. So Obamacare has actually driven the cost of our premiums up. We know that those out-of-pocket costs have gone up. The deductibles have gone up. And so what we have out there are products through those insurance companies, through Obamacare, that our Iowa families simply can't afford.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. We're going to now head over to Ms. Theresa Greenfield. What would you do to ensure rural Iowans have access to the same level of health care as those living in urban and suburban areas?
Well, I have to tell you, I wouldn't do what Senator Ernst did, which is to vote repeatedly to end the Affordable Care Act, gutting protections for pre-existing conditions, gutting coverage for prescription care, mental health care, maternity coverage, and of course, threatening to end Medicaid expansion, which has been a lifeline to our rural hospitals. I was just out in eastern Woodbury County and talked to a family who's already driving 25 miles to get groceries and to get to a clinic and a hospital. We have to make sure that we're strengthening and enhancing the Affordable Care Act, protecting Medicaid expansion, which will help keep those rural hospitals and rural health clinics open, and again, making sure that everyone has coverage for all of the essential services that were provided in that plan. Senator Ernst, again, has voted repeatedly to end the Affordable Care Act and end your protections, taking away your health care.
Thank you, Ms. Greenfield. We're now going to head over to Senator Ernst. She did mention your name. You have 30 seconds to respond.
Yes, thank you so much. And again, the Affordable Care Act, while it expanded access to insurance, it did absolutely nothing to control the cost of health care, which is why I have worked in a bipartisan manner to make sure that those with pre-existing conditions are covered, providing that federal backstop for those that have the most medically complex situations. I am a huge supporter of our community health centers and our rural health care systems. It is very important that we are supporting those, but the public option that Ms. Greenfield keeps referencing would drive 52 of our Iowa hospital systems, those rural healthcare systems, out of business.
Thank you so much, Senator. Candidates, let's move on to the economy. The federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, has been since 2009. Iowa is one of a handful of states that has not increased its minimum wage. At $7.25 an hour, the average minimum wage worker would make $16,240 in a year. You both worked minimum wage jobs, so I'll ask you, when the minimum wage when you worked was roughly $4 an hour, could you have supported a family at that wage? And we begin with Senator Ernst.
Yes, I have worked at minimum wage jobs. I worked at Hardee's, certainly while I was in high school and then into college. I did work my way through college. But no, you could not support a family on a minimum wage jobs. And typically those jobs are entry points into our workforce. But I do believe that it is a local issue, and there's no reason that it could not be addressed by the state or local city or government. So the federal government, we should be taking a look at that. Certainly there are ways that we can do that. But again, economies are so very different across the United States. What might be right for California or New York simply may not be right for our rural communities in Iowa. A living wage in San Francisco would be very different than a living wage in Red Oak, Iowa, or Waterloo, Iowa.
Senator, thank you. Ms. Greenfield, the same question to you. You worked minimum wage jobs as a young person. Could you have supported a family on the minimum wage, which at the time was about $4 an hour?
Well, of course, we can't support a family on that minimum wage, and you can't support a family on $7.25 an hour either. I support raising the minimum wage, but I'll tell you what I'm really focused on, and that is making sure everyone has an opportunity to earn a living wage. And in my small towns and bigger paycheck plan, I'm focused on, one, making sure we invest, like Republican Governor Bob Ray did, in debt-free community college, trade schools, technical schools. Two, we couple that with investments in capital and credit for small businesses so they can grow too and hire those workers, or those folks with new skills can go out and start their own small businesses, and of course provide for their families, have a shot at their American dream. We need to raise the minimum wage.
All right, I'd like to follow up right now with both candidates, kind of a follow-up to Matt's economic question with jobs and COVID in mind. And the question is this, 7.9 is the unemployment rate in America right now. That's down slightly, so that is an improvement. However, the growth in jobs slowed considerably from August to September. For example, my friend DJ Holbach at Randalls and Hudson said he had to lay off some of his employees because of the ongoing pandemic. So with Iowa and many states still considered in the COVID red zone, what is your specific plan to help get Iowans back to work safely, but yet, all importantly, increase their spending power and give a boost to our economy? Ms. Greenfield, you go first.
Yes. Well, Washington has failed us during this crisis, and of course Senator Ernst has failed us too. Early on, she refused to support expanding unemployment benefits and providing paid sick leave. It was a fight for her. And I have been calling for a Phase 4 stimulus package for months, and we have to focus on health and safety, you bet. But to your point, workers, we are in a crisis right now. We need to extend those expanded unemployment benefits, whether I am talking to breweries, bakeries, barber shops, bowling alleys. Those small businesses are struggling. Their cash flow is down 60 or 80%. They've told me they're worried about keeping the lights on. And so we need to take care of our workers, but we also need to expand the PPP and make sure that our small businesses know that we and they can get through this crisis together. After all, Iowa's a state of small towns and small businesses.
Yes, thank you very much. Senator Ernst, your name came up, so you get a 30-second rebuttal if you choose before you answer this question that I asked. So, rebuttal first.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. I do remember in 2009 when we went through the economic downturn during the Biden-Obama administration, and Montgomery County, my home county where I still reside today, saw the second highest unemployment rate across the state of Iowa. So I do understand those difficulties that are out there. Many of my friends, family members were actually laid off during that time. But certainly supporting the packages such as the CARES package has been important, and my opponent has opposed every single one of those packages. We really have to get that work done. I am here in D.C. working on those packages.
Let's move on.
Senator, thank you.
And
the
may I respond to
economy
the
has
question as well?
regained. Excuse me?
I'm sorry. You know, that's correct, but you went pretty long on your rebuttal. So do you want to answer? Can you give us 30 seconds on that then?
Senator, go
Certainly.
ahead.
So I have worked extensively on the COVID packages that have gone through the Congress. And again, PPP was a project that I worked on. Child care supports to make sure that moms and dads can get back to work safely has been very, very important. Providing PPE to those businesses and those hospitals that needed that support, all of that has been really important. We need to continue that. We do have a package we will be voting on next week, and we hope that we can get that done without Senate Democrats blocking the way.
All right, thank you, Senator. Very concise answer. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator. The economy has regained more than half the jobs it lost during the pandemic, but that recovery has been uneven. Black Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic men, younger Americans, and Americans without a college degree have struggled the most to regain employment. What can the federal government do to target its response to ensure the recovery benefits all Americans? Ms. Greenfield, your response first.
Well, you are correct. You know, our minority communities have been hit the hardest as part of this health pandemic and this economic crisis. And we have to address the kind of systemic racism throughout all of our systems: healthcare, housing, education, policing, all of them, lending, to ensure that we are creating those opportunities for our minority communities to grow and to succeed. And I'll tell you what, right now, though, we're in a crisis, and we need to make sure we extend those expanded unemployment benefits at the full $600. We need to have another round of direct relief for our workers, and then we need to invest in our businesses so that they can rehire or keep their staff on, keep their lights on. And as someone who has worked most of my career in small businesses, I absolutely know how hard it is to keep the lights on and how much pride we have in providing paychecks on a Friday afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Greenfield. Senator Ernst, the same question to you. How can the federal government target its recovery efforts to ensure all Americans prosper?
Well, I think that is really important and something that I have actually been working on. But even before the COVID pandemic is making sure that our minority communities, our communities of color, have that opportunity. We, of course, passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which made way for those opportunity zones, which really did benefit our minority communities and investment in those communities. I do support Pell Grants for those that are incarcerated, so that when they are out of prison, they do have opportunity to move right into a career field that will benefit them and their families, thus, of course, lowering recidivism. So those are important steps forward. But again, I have been a huge proponent, actually helped craft the Paycheck Protection Program, which does enable our small businesses to remain up and going during COVID-19. I've also crafted the next package, which will allow a second pass for those businesses that are hardest hit. And I have also done that with the minority members of the Senate, working together.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. We're going to move forward to the next question here. We want to start this with a straightforward question, this next segment. Most people of color in this country have no doubt that systemic racism exists here. Do you agree? Senator Ernst, we'll start with you.
I believe that there are many challenges that we have in various systems, but I would not say just broadly that we have systemic racism across the board. Certainly we have good people that are working in all career fields, and I think it's important to stress that. My opponent has stated that she believes our law enforcement officers in Iowa, they are systemically racist, and I don't believe that. I believe in the goodness of the people that are out there protecting and defending our communities. So do we have opportunity to do better? Absolutely, we do. And that's why I did sit down with those African American leaders in the city of Des Moines and listening to those voices all across the great state of Iowa, understanding those challenges and where we can provide greater opportunity. Again, it's not a Republican or Democratic issue. It is an issue that we need to work on together.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. To be clear, do you believe systemic racism exists here?
No, I don't. I do believe that you
you
will find racist individuals in those systems, but I don't believe that entire systems of people are racist. There are racists out there. Yes, there are.
So thank you for answering that question. We're going to go over to Ms. Greenfield. Ms. Greenfield, the same question. Most people of color in this country have no doubt that systemic racism exists. Do you agree?
Well, first, I want to take 30 seconds to rebut because Senator Ernst did call me by name. And, you know, her comments are just misleading. I have not called the police racist, and that's rather insulting. But I will tell you this. Discussing systemic racism does not mean that any one individual is a racist, but rather that we have to take a look at the discrimination across our systems: housing, healthcare, education, finance, and so many other things, to ensure that we're doing everything we can to end that kind of racism. To your question, you know, black and brown communities have faced discrimination and systemic racism for generations. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others, you know, they should be alive today. Their families deserve justice. And so we need to work on ending that kind of systemic racism in policing, for example. We've done a great job to get started on that right here in Iowa, led by our Black Legislative Caucus members, Black Lives Matters leaders, and in a bipartisan fashion at our State House, where they passed the Plan for a More Perfect Union, requiring racial bias training, de-escalation training, banning chokeholds, to bring in transparency. These are the kinds of reforms that support our law enforcement systems, and we need to look at those reforms in every system so that we can bring an end to systemic racism and make sure that our minority communities can succeed.
Thank you, Ms. Greenfield. And to be clear, my opponent does not qualify a rebuttal moving forward. And we're now going to head over to Matt.
Rhea, thank you. I want to bring up the specific quotes referenced by both candidates in that Iowa PBS debate. I think it's clear we need to hear what they both said in context, and then I'll ask my question. Senator Ernst, you had said the following: Theresa Greenfield has stated that our law enforcement system is systemically racist, meaning that our law enforcement officers are racist, end quote. Theresa Greenfield, you said in response, quote, "We have systemic racism in all of our systems and have for generations, including our policing system, but that is not saying that our police officers are racist," end quote. I wanted to make sure you had that quote clear so I could ask the follow-up question: where does change start? We begin with Theresa Greenfield.
Well, thank you for that question. I think change starts with each of us, and it certainly starts with our elected leaders, recognizing first and foremost that we do have systemic racism. If you're not clear that that's part of our systems, then you can't be at the table to lead the change, to listen, and to take action to end discrimination. So it starts with working together. I certainly have been working with the Black Legislative Caucus right here in Iowa, and will work with anyone to make sure that we are taking actions to end systemic racism. And it's not just in policing. I'll tell you what, in healthcare, I'm worried about maternal mortality rates. And with black women, that rate is so much higher than the rest of the state. So we need to work in our healthcare systems, too, to end that kind of racial bias. I'm looking forward to rolling up my sleeves and working with everyone to tackle systemic racism.
Thank you, Ms. Greenfield. Senator Ernst, you had mentioned in the aftermath, you had said you had sat down and listened to communities of color. How do you translate that listening to action? Where does the change start for you?
Yes, and thank you so much. And of course, I started actions towards repairing relations long before we started seeing this movement, long before we saw the tragic loss of life with George Floyd, his murder. Certainly, there are ways that we can do that. Now, I was a co-author of the Ban the Box legislation with Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, who is a very good partner to me on a number of these activities. But certainly, as I said, supporting those Pell Grant activities in our prison system, very important, because not only do we want to provide communities of color, those that are incarcerated, with those opportunities, but what I find is often it comes back to the fact of poverty, maybe not necessarily racism here in the state of Iowa, but how do we tackle those issues of poverty? And this can be urban, it can be rural, because I see it across the communities in the state of Iowa, and we really do have to provide opportunity out there. And again, I've been working in a bipartisan way with friends and other members in the Senate to do so.
Next question, Theresa Greenfield. Do you think this summer's protests were helpful or harmful in raising awareness of racial issues in Iowa?
Well, I'll always stand for our First Amendment rights, and that includes the right to free speech and to protest. I'll tell you what, though, looting, damaging property, that's not part of protesting. I was a small business owner. I worked with many small businesses, and I don't like to see the damage to our storefronts and to our properties. But absolutely, we do need to march. We do need to protest in a nonviolent and peaceful way to make sure that our voices are being heard. And I am proud of the Black Lives Matter leaders here in our state who absolutely, predominantly have been making their voices heard in a nonviolent way.
Theresa Greenfield, I do have a follow-up for you. The phrase defunding the police resurfaced out of those protests. What does that phrase mean to you? Ms. Greenfield? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. The phrase defunding the police surfaced out of those protests this summer. What does the phrase defunding the police mean to you?
Well, I don't support defunding the police, so somebody else will have to give me that definition. But I do tell you this, we have got to look at reforms across all of our systems, and certainly in policing. You know, I come from a long line of law enforcement officers. My father-in-law was a police officer, and he always talked about serving and protecting and serving, and he had a lot of pride in stopping by the sandlots to meet with the kids, knowing everyone in his community. So we've got to get back to building that strong community policing, and we need to support our law enforcement officers by investing in a couple things. One, mental health care services. Too often we're asking our law enforcement officers to provide those mental health care services, and our jails certainly have become a place where folks in crisis are taken. We need to make sure that we invest in mental health care. And then I think we need to absolutely make Ban the Box something federally throughout this country, because it is the best step to make sure that folks do not re-enter and that they have the opportunity to get a job, provide for their families, and rebuild their lives.
Thank you very much. Senator Ernst, do you think this summer's protests were helpful or harmful in raising awareness of racial issues in Iowa?
I think the protests, as they initially started after, again, the very tragic death of George Floyd, I think as they started and as they were peaceful, I think they were very, very helpful. But as they digressed back to looting and damaging of not only those small businesses, but federal property, I think it really smeared those that were trying to do good through those protests. And as I had stated many months ago, is that you can't hear those peaceful protesters over the sounds of shattering glass and splintering wood. That is certainly not appropriate. So I do think that we have slid backwards in this movement. Now, in the Senate, we did take up the Justice Act, which was authored by Tim Scott of South Carolina. It was a wonderful bill which had 70% of what our Democratic friends were asking for. But they refused to even move on the bill on the floor of the Senate. I'm so proud of the legislators here in the great state of Iowa that got the work done. But again, Senate Democrats were not willing to move forward on a bill in the Senate, and I think that's a shame. We should be a lot further along than we are right now.
Police, Senator Ernst, please let's stick to our time guidelines here. The phrase defunding the police, Senator Ernst, what does that mean to you?
Well, the phrase has been tossed around so liberally by liberals, and certainly the folks that are funding my opponent is a group. They support radical environmental ideas. They support defunding the police, and we actually see that type of activity going on right now with the COVID relief package that is being proposed by Nancy Pelosi, which was one of Ms. Greenfield's early supporters in the 2018 congressional campaign. So she, of course, is being backed by all of these folks that support liberal ideas, stripping away funds, taking those funds away from police departments in the COVID-19 relief bill. That's not what Iowans expect to see. It's not what Iowans want, but it is certainly what Ms. Greenfield's backers are supporting.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Theresa Greenfield, you get a 30-second rebuttal because the senator mentioned your name twice. So just 30 seconds.
Well, this shouldn't take too long. I don't support defunding the police, and it's unfortunate that Senator, my opponent, continues to be misleading and misrepresenting on that. But I do support reforms in all of our systems so that we can tackle discrimination and we can tackle systemic racism. And we've done a great job at getting started at that right here in Iowa.
Thank you, Ms. Greenfield. Brianne.
Sensitivity trainings in federal agencies saying ideas like white privilege are racist. Do either of you believe that you've benefited from white privilege? And if so, I'd like you to give us an example. Ms. Greenfield, let's start with you.
Brianne, I did not hear the first part of your question. I apologize. It's very, very difficult to hear you.
I apologize. President Donald Trump has moved to end racial sensitivity training in federal agencies. It looks like you're having a hard time hearing me, so we'll direct this to Senator Ernst. But President Trump has moved to end racial sensitivity training in federal agencies, saying ideas like white privilege are racist. Do you believe that you've ever benefited from white privilege?
Well, I would say it's difficult to determine. Again, I think it goes back to maybe not necessarily racism, but issues of poverty within our communities. I largely grew up in a community of white individuals, but when I joined the military, I was a member of a very racially diverse but inclusive system. So I understood that working very hard would help me get ahead. So I don't know that I benefited from that, but certainly it's possible that it exists out there. But I do believe that there are levels of training that are necessary in any sort of system. Of course, in the military, things like engaging in how to prevent sexual assault, those types of activities, I do think that there is an important place for that type of training.
Ms. Greenfield, we'll try you again. Do you believe that you've ever benefited from white privilege?
No, absolutely I have, and let me give you an example. You know, after my first husband died, I became a single mom with a 13-month-old and another one on the way, and one of the systems that really came in and helped me out was a Social Security system. It allowed me to get back on my feet, and I'm not convinced that that system would have worked for a young, widowed black woman with a 13-month-old and another one on the way. And I can tell you another way that I benefited. I'll tell you what, maternal mortality mortality rates. It's very clear that they're so much higher amongst the black community. I do not have those kinds of issues, but too many of our black women do. And so we have to look at why that's happening, what that discrimination is, where is the racial bias, be willing to look at ourselves, and then make sure that we're investing in training to address that kind of racial bias in healthcare, in policing, in education, in the Social Security system, in lending, and so many other things.
All right, Ms. Greenfield, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Senator Ernst, as well. We appreciate you hanging with us. Very unusual debate we're having here tonight, and you, the viewer, we appreciate your patience as well.
Absolutely. We've got the ball rolling, and we intend to keep it that way. We'll be right back after this.
Storm Down.
as I've talked to farmers, as I've stopped at co-ops and elevators, and talked to them about how they've been impacted. And it's clear there is a gap, and particularly coverage for our grain bins. But the reality is so many farmers are under financial stress in Iowa due to haphazard trade, due to abusive, reckless tariffs, due to my opponent's approval of ethanol waivers. Net farm income is down 75% since 2013. Bankruptcy rates are at an 8-year high, and we have got to make better decisions in Washington, D.C. to make sure that our farmers who work so hard, who want their markets back, can earn a profit and provide for their families.
My question is a simple ag question. Theresa Greenfield, you answer first. What's the break-even price for a bushel of corn in Iowa this week?
Well, a bushel of corn is going for about $3.68 today, $3.69, and break even really just depends on the amount of debt someone has. I suspect there's farmers that are breaking even at that price. However, if their yields are down 50%, that's certainly not going to cover it for them. I'll tell you, we've had low commodity prices for too long, and they've been going out of business prices.
Senator, break-even price for soybeans for an Iowa farmer to produce?
Yeah, certainly. I would like to go back to previous statement. Certainly, with what we have done on trade, we have seen significant strides forward. So the USMCA is a great example of that with our two largest trade partners, Mexico and Canada. Mexico is the #1 purchaser of Iowa corn. We just saw with the China Phase 1 trade deal where China actually made an all-time record corn purchase at the end of July. So haphazard trade deals? No. I think we are on the path towards success in these areas. And I have had our farmers, as I do the 99-county tour every year. I've been to all of my rural communities every single year that I have been in the United States Senate. I have had those farmers say, for heaven's sakes, I understand what the president is doing. What I don't understand is why we didn't have a president that stood up for us before this. So I am thankful that we are well on our way to correcting the situation within our trade space, and that was done with a Republican Senate and a Republican in the White House.
Well, thank you very much. I might have missed it, but I don't think you answered my question. What's the break-even price for soybeans in Iowa? You grew up on a farm. You should know this.
I think you had asked about corn, and it depends on.
I asked her corn.
It depends on what the inputs are, but probably about $5.50.
Well, you're a couple dollars off, I think, here because it's 10:05. So we'll move on to something else then.
And I don't think Ms. Greenfield answered either.
She actually did with the price of corn. We had asked for the price of soybeans from you, Senator. You want to take another crack at it?
No, thank you. You said the break even for corn is $10.50. I don't think that's correct.
Right, that would have been for beans. Ron's question was soybeans
or maybe
to you,
I'm not
Ms.
hearing.
Greenfield, to corn to Ms. Greenfield. Let's go ahead and move on to a completely different subject, party unity. What issue in your party's platform do you disagree with? Senator Ernst, we start with you.
Oh, in the party platform, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. There are many things that I do support, though, and that is certainly lower taxes for our hard middle-income wage earners. I think that that is extremely important. I think that access to quality health care is extremely important. And, of course, our Second Amendment rights are extremely important as well. I mean, there are so many things. I could go on and on and on. But certainly my opponent is backed by others outside of the great state of Iowa, like New York and California, that she's the handpicked candidate of Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. And certainly the values that that Democratic Party is espousing, the party of AOC, of defunding the police, of extreme liberal environmental ideas, those are the ideas that would devastate our Iowa farms. It would end manufacturing as we know it. Those are the ideas I don't support.
Senator, thank you. Theresa Greenfield, the same question to you, although you might wander away from it a bit during the 1-minute answer. I'll ask you, what issue in the party's platform do you disagree with?
You know, I think Democrats often talk about four-year college too much, and while I'm really proud of our four-year institutions, I am focused on making sure absolutely every Iowan gets off to a great start. And in my small town's bigger paycheck plan, I'm focused on investing, like Republican Governor Bob Ray did, in trade schools, technical schools, community college, apprenticeship programs, just like the one they have here at Carpenter's Local 106, where you can earn while you learn. I want to make sure every student gets off to that start. Or if your life throws you a curve, you're able to get back and get some retraining. That way, we will build our workforce, we will grow workers for our businesses and our small businesses, and then I want to couple that with capital and credit. Let me give you an example. I talked to a young woman in Rembrandt who is studying early family childhood education with the dream of owning a daycare center. And if she came out debt-free and we were to help her with some capital, she could get started on opening her own daycare center.
Ms. Greenfield, moving on, each of you has criticized your opponent for accepting outside money in her race. Each of you has also benefited from it. So if you're so opposed to this practice, what would you do if elected to get all of this money out of politics? Ms. Greenfield, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the very first plan I proposed was a plan to end political corruption, to end Citizens United, to end corporate PAC donations, to end those dark money groups. You know, those are the ones that are running those nasty attack ads that ruin your YouTube videos and your football games. And I did even more. I said and made a pledge not to accept one dime of those corporate PAC donations. My opponent, she's taken over $2 million in those donations and has sold out Iowans. You can tell she's taken over $200,000 from Big Pharma and sold out our seniors. We're refusing to lower those Medicare drug costs. She's taken over $450,000 from Big Oil and put one of their guys to head the EPA, who's issued those ethanol waivers and devastated our economy. I said enough is enough. We need to end political corruption, and I drew a line in the sand to not accept one dime of corporate PAC donations.
Senator Ernst, same question to you. What would you do to get money out of politics?
So easy. Transparency. If you force those donors to disclose who they're donating to what organization, I can guarantee you the whole system would clean up quickly. That's the easy answer. Now, what my opponent won't tell you is at the end of this election cycle, she will be Iowa's leading benefactor of outside independent expenditure money, what is known as dark money. So we see tens of millions of dollars coming from undisclosed sources outside of the state of Iowa dumping in to her campaign. So on one hand, she's saying, oh, I want to get rid of it. But at the second time, or in the other hand, she's actually benefiting more than any other candidate in Iowa history from all of those dark outside sources. So she is benefiting from Big Pharma. She's benefiting from Big Oil as well. The difference is the executives and lobbyists are writing the dollars directly into her campaign.
Senator Ernst, thank you very much. I want to address now some of the timing issues we had early on in our debate. We had technical difficulties which prevented Theresa Greenfield from answering several questions. We gave those questions to Senator Ernst, who was able to answer those completely. So in an effort to balance things out, the next question will only go to Theresa Greenfield. So Ms. Greenfield, during the Iowa PBS debate, you said you supported a path to citizenship for immigrants, for undocumented immigrants and dreamers. Could you see yourself supporting legal residency, not a path to citizenship, but legal residency if it was a bipartisan compromise?
Well, we need to modernize our immigration system. As I have crisscrossed this state, it doesn't matter if I am talking to faith leaders or immigrant communities like I met with in Davenport, whether I'm talking to economic leaders like in Cedar Rapids and the Des Moines Partnership and so many others. It is clear we need to modernize our immigration system. And for me, I think it starts with a few things. One, I like a lot of the ideas put forth by the bipartisan bipartisan Iowa Compact on immigration, where we start by modernizing that visa system to ensure that we can grow our economy and that we welcome all workers across the board, whether they know how to fix things, whether they know how to care for things, whether they know about science and so many other things. Two, we need, of course, to invest in public safety. We have to be safe and we have to be strong, but we have to be smart, and that starts with investing in our ports. And finally, we have to be humane and keep families together, and that's where that path to citizenship comes in, certainly for our DACA recipients and creating that path for our undocumented immigrants.
Your time's up. Thank you. Moving on to the next question. This is for the both of you, but it will go first to Senator Ernst. Former Vice President Joe Biden referenced the recent derecho that swept through Iowa in August as an impact of climate change during the first debate. Do you, Senator Ernst, believe in climate change and that it is caused by human activity?
I do believe in climate change, and I think our climate has been changing since the dawn of time. And certainly we as mankind can absolutely do a better job at protecting our environment. And that's why I do back so many efforts, both in the United States Senate and during my time in the Iowa Senate as well, to make sure that we have strong conservation efforts, that we protect our biofuel system, and that we are investing in wind and solar energy. Iowa right now, thanks to the efforts of my colleagues, Republican colleagues, both in the United States Senate and during my time in the Iowa Senate, supported wind energy. We see Iowa's electric, the amount that we use is about 40% drawn from wind energy. After Mid-America gets done with their wind towers in my neck of the woods, we'll pull 80% from those wind towers. Investing in solar is important, but then certainly conservation efforts with our farmers is important to make sure our water and soil is healthy as well.
Thank you very much. Theresa Greenfield, do you believe climate change is caused by human activity?
We have to confront climate change because we have a man-made global climate crisis on our hands, and Iowans certainly know what that looks like, whether it's flooding in southeast Iowa, flooding in southwest Iowa. And by the way, I visited southwest Iowa and saw homes that had 9 feet of water in them, and those families' dreams are gone. Farmers know what it looks like: higher heat, higher humidity, shorter planting periods. So here's where I want to start. We need to get back into our global agreements. This is a global crisis. It's not just an Iowa crisis. And then we need to invest in renewable jobs here. I'm going to be focused on how we grow jobs, how we grow the Iowa economy. And then finally, conservation. And in my Fair Shot for Farmers plan, you'll see that I propose to lead the efforts to have our farmers at the table and have them lead us to being the first net zero ag industry in the world. And it starts with investing in conservation, making sure it is a new commodity for our farmers, for our landowners. They should reap the rewards of sequestering carbon and improving that soil health. And I'm going to work with them every step on the way.
Thank you, Ms. Greenfield. Over the past several years, Iowa has experienced record flooding, prolonged drought, and now a derecho windstorm. What role does the federal government have in protecting Iowans and their livelihoods from these weather events? Ms. Greenfield, you're first.
Thank you. Well, I just explained, and of course, that I believe we do have a man-made climate crisis, and we do need to take steps to confront it. And one of the things that we can do, and I've been disappointed in both parties, by the way, is infrastructure. We need to be investing in a robust infrastructure plan to rebuild bridges. We're 50th in the nation in bridge suitability. We need to bring broadband to every home, and we need to do so much more. Lock and dams, sanitary sewer systems, water systems throughout our state and throughout our country. That kind of infrastructure investment will set our country up and our state up to compete and win for generations to come.
Thank you, Ms. Greenfield. Senator Ernst, same question to you. What should the federal government do, if anything, to protect Iowans from these severe weather events?
I think there are many things that we can do, Breanne, and thank you so much. During those devastating floods of 2008, I was actually on the ground in the Cedar Rapids area as a National Guardsman, providing logistical support throughout the area and witnessing the damaging situation at hand. During the 2011 event in southwest Iowa, I spent 4 months on the ground, again with the National Guard, monitoring the situation. 4 months, we had homes that were underwater in my neck of the woods, and watching my neighbors struggle with that was very, very difficult. So providing that national federal response is very important, but of course making sure that we are not engaging in very, very harmful agreements like my opponent has referenced, where she would engage us but have devastating effects on our economy throughout the United States. But those agreements let huge polluters like China off the hook. So I think we need to hold other countries accountable, and certainly we can do our job within the federal government in a bipartisan manner to correct our own actions.
Thank you. This next question is for the both of you. Mid-American Energy and Alliant Energy continue to invest in wind technology. Both companies say the construction of wind farms provides jobs to Iowans, payments to landholders, and stable prices for consumers. The production tax credit that has come out of a lot of recent growth is set to expire at the end of this year. Should Congress renew it? Senator Ernst, I know you started to talk about this earlier. Let's go to you first.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I am a huge supporter of wind energy. I've even co-sponsored a bill that would allow us to utilize training at our community colleges to further invest in those types of career opportunities. So I think that is extremely important. Now, when I talk to those, like those at Mid-American or others that are engaged in wind energy, they are okay with that production tax credit being phased out. We actually have seen great benefits with that wind energy across the state of Iowa. So engaging in those discussions, we see a great level of energy and optimism throughout that field. I have actually gone up in a wind tower during one of my 99 county tours. That was a couple years ago. And I've also heard from a rural school district that said the only reason they are still surviving today is because of the tax dollars, the property tax dollars that are drawn off of those wind turbines. So it is so beneficial for our rural areas. Very proud of it.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Ms. Greenfield, the same question to you. Both companies say the construction of wind farms provides jobs to Iowans as well as other benefits. The production tax credit that has come out of a lot of recent growth is set to expire at the end of this year. Should Congress renew it?
Congress should renew those production tax credits. We have so much potential to grow our wind energy industry here in Iowa, to not only benefit Iowa, but to benefit our entire country. I've had the opportunity to sit down with some of the brightest minds and scientists at the Iowa State University and talk about how we build renewable energy jobs right here in Iowa, and wind can lead the way. I've had the opportunity to tour multiple wind turbine farms, and just really was delighted when I toured a community wind turbine farm out in Greene County. Not only does it provide the rent, but it provides resources that are being invested back into communities for community centers and other philanthropic plans. And so we need to grow our wind energy. We need to grow our biofuels. We need to invest in conservation. We need to invest in bio-based manufacturing and make sure Iowa is a leader in our renewable economy.
Candidates, let's move on to talk trade now. Do you feel that President Trump's tariff policies with China have been a net positive for the American people? Theresa Greenfield, we begin with you.
Well, I'll tell you, China's been a bad actor, that's for sure, and we do need to hold them accountable, and I always will hold them accountable. We have to protect our jobs and our farmers and our national security, but right now, you know, we have lost 33,000 Iowa jobs to China, and right now China is investing. They're on schedule to build 200 new airports over the next 15 years. They're building 3,000 miles of high-speed rail on an annual basis, and here we are, no infrastructure package, fighting about keeping the post office open, and price of corn is barely at a break-even price, and too many kids don't have access to broadband. I want to make those investments in our economy, in our infrastructure, so that we can compete and win, and it starts with ending this go-it-alone approach. We've got to work together with our partners around the world to make sure we build strong markets for our farmers, for our manufacturers, for our economy.
Senator Ernst, the same question to you. The president's tariff policy with China, has it been a net positive for American consumers?
Well, I have never agreed with the president's tariff policy, and the president knows that. That's where I've been able to push back on him as we've engaged through the trade wars. He does use it as leverage, and I think with a country like China, it likely is appropriate. Has it been helpful all across the board? No, and that's why I do call him, and I say, Mr. President, I need to talk to you about these tariffs, and he will come back and he'll say, oh, Joni, I know that you don't like tariffs, but I'm a tariff guy. You know, so we have those discussions about what's happening with the American farmer and how it's affecting our Iowa commodity prices. But certainly we've seen great successes because he has used that leverage. So again, we are moving on our way to parity, I think, in that trade space. The Phase 1 China deal, great example. Certainly with the USMCA, we've seen great strides there. We have Japan, our number 3 trade partner, already locked into a trade deal, and we're working on the UK and EU right now as well.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. A question on national security now. What do you see as the greatest non-COVID security threat to America? Senator Ernst, you're first.
Yes, I can answer this a couple different ways. Number one, if you look at our security, of course, our national debt is a crisis that we really do need to face. But externally, we have what we call the Big Four, certainly North Korea, Iran, China, and Russia. Those are very bad actors, and we have to keep our eye on them in the national security space. Now, this I can talk to because I am a combat veteran. I remain engaged with our security forces as they are deployed around the globe. We have many of our National Guardsmen now serving in the Middle East. We have them serving in Kosovo. We have them serving in Africa. So I do understand why we need to keep our eye on the Big Four and, of course, terrorist activities and proxies sent out by Iran and others. But certainly we need to address the domestic situation of our debt as well.
Thank you, Senator. A follow-up question. In September, the leader of the Department of Homeland Security said white supremacists are the most persistent and lethal threat when we talk about domestic violent extremists. What role does Congress have in monitoring and reducing this threat?
Well, again, certainly we need to make sure that we are bolstering and funding our law enforcement activities. So when we talk about defunding the police across the United States, it goes against wiping out those types of domestic terrorists. So certainly we need to keep an eye on that. Those types of organizations are absolutely unacceptable. There is no excuse for them, period. And I would say across the board, any organization that is promoting violence, I don't care whether it's white supremacists or otherwise, anytime you're promoting destruction of property and violence against other citizens, it is absolutely wrong. But defunding the police and that movement from the liberal left is certainly not the answer. If anything, we should be bolstering those programs to make sure that they can keep their eyes and their ears on those horrible, horrible domestic organizations.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Greenfield, same question to you. What do you believe is the greatest non-COVID security threat to Americans?
Well, there are two threats that I think are incredibly important to look at. One is certainly domestic terrorists. Clearly, our national leaders believe that is one serious threat that we need to be watching and monitoring and making sure that it does not cost Americans their lives. Second, cybersecurity. I'll tell you what, we have seen meddling in our elections, and we need to make sure that our law enforcement, FBI, and federal agencies have the resources they need. Look, if you're stealing credit card information, if you're spreading misinformation, if you're tampering with our elections, those are a crime, and we need to make sure that we find those folks and that they're held accountable. And last, I just have to say I find it odd that Senator Ernst would recognize debt as a threat when she voted for a tax bill that increased the debt $2 trillion and certainly now threatens things like Social Security and Medicare.
Senator Ernst, you have a 30-second rebuttal.
Yes. Thank you. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act actually built up our middle class, providing more wages for those middle income earners. 1 million Iowans saw the benefit of that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We saw the child tax credit doubled for our families. 243,000 Iowans benefited from that. And we saw an average of about $2,000 tax savings for all Iowans on, again, average. But again, because of that bill, our gross domestic product has grown. We have seen growth in the economy, and that is good for actually being able to tackle that national debt.
That brings us to the end of our debate this evening. We want to let the candidates have the final word.
That's right. You each have 60 seconds to make a closing statement. Theresa Greenfield, we start with you.
All right. Well, it's been an honor and a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you so much. You know, I got in this race to put Iowans first, for hardworking families. And I'll tell you what, my dad always said on the farm, there's no boy jobs or girl jobs, just jobs that need to get done. And right now, Washington's not getting jobs done. I want Washington to work more like our hometowns, where we come together to get work done. And I'll work with anyone or stand up to anyone to make sure we're getting those jobs done. Healthcare for all of us, infrastructure plan, rebuild this economy. Senator Ernst has had 6 years, and she's forgotten Iowans. She sold out our farmers. She sold out our seniors. She sold out our hardworking families. And I got in this fight for hardworking families, and let me tell you why. You know, after my first husband died and I got back on my feet, I got my very first job. It was for $8 an hour. I got a paycheck, but I also got my dignity back. And Iowans want the dignity of providing for their families. So here's my promise to you. I'll never forget who I am, where I'm from, and who I'm fighting for. Thanks for being here tonight, and I humbly ask everyone for their vote on November 3rd.
Thank you, Theresa Greenfield. Senator Ernst, you have 60 seconds for a closing statement.
Thank you. I am Joni Ernst, and Iowa is more than a place to me. It is where I was raised and really who I am. Now, I will always fight for our farmers because I grew up on a small Iowa farm. I will always fight for our veterans because I have had my boots in that sand and I understand their valiant sacrifice. I will always stand up for our working families and our single moms because I have been through those struggles myself. And I will always be an advocate for our sexual assault and domestic violence survivors because I've been in that horrible situation myself. Now, I will always fight for Iowa, but that means doing it in a bipartisan fashion. And I am so honored to be named as one of the most bipartisan senators in the United States Senate in the last 25 years, because I know that the way things get done is by working together. So as we move through this election, I want to continue fighting for Iowans, and I am humbly asking for your support on November 3rd. There's a lot more to do.
Thank thank you, Senator Ernst and Ms. Greenfield, for participating in tonight's debate. A big thank you to Franklin Junior High for giving us space to host this event.
And a big thank you to all of our viewers across the state of Iowa for hanging with us tonight. This has been a very important debate and a very important election between two candidates who have a lot to say, a big choice to make, folks, coming up on November 3rd. We also want to thank our media partners who helped produce this debate, KWWL, KTIV, and the Des Moines Register. And thank you to KTTC, WGEM, WQAD, and KETV for bringing this debate to voters across the state of Iowa. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you very much for your patience. Please be well. Have a good night.
Fulfill all your home decorating dreams at Chicago Street Decorating Center. Our huge product selection